Y'all see the title, man. Let's get to it.
After this
Right
year's
out here.
NBA Finals, one of the big time
Disrespecting
talking points we
Jokic.
had is whether
Joker.
Nikola Jokic, the top 10 center in NBA
crazy.
history. And after dominating the way he did, averaging a 30-point triple-double, being great virtually every game, myself and many think Jokic is indeed a top 10 center in NBA history. And we're looking at that top 10, one of the guys who's vying for that status is Dwight Howard. And when it comes to Dwight, he's a curious case of not being a what-if, but not being a top 5 center like many thought he'd be. As in the late 2000s, early 2010s, Dwight definitively was the best center in the game. But post-Orlando, being in LA, Houston, really anywhere he went, he was kind of underwhelming. And really for that entire era, Dwight's prime, even post-prime, his biggest critic was Shaquille O'Neal. What Shaq did to Dwight for years, being an old head, is what Dwight now is doing to Jokic. As in an interview, when asked who's better, himself or Jokic, here's what he said. Quote, "Prime Dwight Howard all day, every day. I'm dominating every play with a smile on my face." Now, when it comes to Dwight Howard, when he says dominating with a smile on his face, I assume he's talking about defensively. Because offensively, even Dwight at his peak in his prime had very little, if any, post moves. And seeing Dwight have these comments, kind of boosting himself up, overrating himself, it's a weird conundrum. Because historically speaking, Dwight actually is very underrated. As the NBA's top 75 all time, him being left off that list was indeed a tragedy. So with that out of the way, comparing Dwight versus Jokic at their peaks in their primes, I can't lie. Prime Dwight Howard, simply put, had way more flaws than the Joker. First off, like I said earlier, not being an elite post player. Most Dwight's points come off lobs, putbacks, and being dependent on guards like Jameer Nelson, Hedo Turkoglu, and Rashard Lewis. And even Akeem in 2013 with the Rockets, trying to help Dwight's post-game, said, quote, "He's very raw," and got frustrated with his lack of improvement. Looking past that, kind of going hand in hand, Dwight's offensive game, really outside of 5 feet, was almost non-existent.
That's crazy.
As looking at Dwight's career, inside of 10 feet, 99.9% of his points came in that area. Compared to Jokic, who for his career in the playoffs, from deep, shoots 41.2%. 10 to 16 feet, 45.8, and 16 feet to three-point line, 44.6. And when it came to free throws, Dwight Howard historically is one of the worst centers of all time. As in the playoffs for his career, he shot an abysmal 54.8%, the 7th worst in NBA history. Compared to Jokic, who also in the playoffs shoots 82.6, the 7th highest all time for a center in the playoffs. Now also for Dwight Howard, when it came to fourth quarter play, clutch time play, he wasn't a go-to player like Jokic or the elite offensive players. As looking at his fourth quarter play, from 2007 to 2012, he averaged 4.2 points per game on 60% shooting, 0% from 3, and 55.7% from the free throw line.
What Jokic is
and when
doing.
it came to Dwight Howard's best ever season in 2009,
that was a crazy
on that
dunk.
Orlando team, he ranked
Put them rebounds
4th
and assists in
in
there
fourth
too,
quarter
though.
scoring, behind Jameer Nelson, Rashard Lewis, and Hedo Turkoglu. Now looking at Jokic, from 2019 to 2023, his entire playoff career, he averages 6.2 points on 51% shooting, 37% from 3, and 87% from the free throw line. And this year, en route to the championship, compared to the entire NBA, ranked 3rd in fourth quarter scoring. Now, the biggest gap between Dwight Howard and Jokic is the playmaking and passing gap. As Dwight Howard is passing even his top 10, 15 traits, I don't think so. Compared to Jokic, who historically is the best passing big I've ever seen, the best passer in the NBA currently, and all time, one of the top 10 playmakers in NBA history. And for his Nuggets team, he is basically the point center and the pseudo point guard. As for Denver, they quite literally can run their offense through Jokic. Something for Orlando they never did for Dwight Howard. And also a big contrast, the Joker on the fast break can get the board, run the floor, find teammates, or finish at the rim. And if you want to go one step further, Jokic today, his offensive arsenal is really second to none. And efficiency-wise, he's up there with the best players in NBA history, like Kevin Durant, Michael Jordan, and LeBron James. I'll give Dwight this. In his prime and his peak, he was more athletic and played much better defense. And speaking of defense, I've seen a lot of fans say Dwight Howard back in 2020, quote-unquote, locked Jokic up. And this take right here is revisionist history 101. As Jokic in that series, while he didn't play all-time great, was still very, very good. Averaging 21.8 points, 7.2 boards, 5.0 assists on above 50% shooting. And what you might say is that, well, he had those great stats, but Dwight individually locked him down. Even that's not true. Looking at all 5 games in this series, Jokic versus Dwight Howard, when Dwight guarded him, Jokic had 26 points on exactly 50% shooting. And for fans who still say Dwight Howard locked up Jokic, what you're ignoring is that Anthony Davis and JaVale McGee were behind Dwight Howard, waiting for Jokic at the rim. So, looking at more of Dwight's comments in reference to Jokic, he says in his prime, comparing the two, it's a wrap. I'm Dwight Howard, I know I've been in this league, all-time centers, I'm top 10. Now, comparing Jokic versus Dwight Howard, the resumes...
Man, that's sort of like Brown calling himself the GOAT. You know, you gotta let other people
it's a little bit difficult.
Say it for you,
But looking at Jokic, he has 2 MVPs, 5-time All-NBA, 1-time Finals MVP, and a 1-time champion. Dwight in his own right is a 1-time champion, albeit past his prime, a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, 5-time All-Defensive, and 8-time All-NBA. You could say Dwight at this point has longevity to be greater than Jokic, but in my view, win this year's championship as the best player, the best in the world, is something Dwight Howard never ever accomplished. Now, what Dwight said, he said, prime Dwight Howard, it's a wrap. I totally push back on that and disagree.
Facts.
As comparing prime Dwight Howard versus Jokic, it's not even comparable with their playoff play. As Jokic averaged nearly 8 more points per game, more assists, less turnovers, better from 3, as were the free throw line. And looking at their true shooting percentage, which is a better metric, Dwight and Jokic are virtually identical. And all the other advanced numbers you can look at, PER, box plus minus, Jokic in those categories destroys Dwight Howard. Now, what some might say is that Dwight Howard, at his absolute peak, his best of the best, he was better than Jokic. And for his best season, that was 2009, compared to Jokic, who to this date had his best year in 2023. Comparing these two players in their playoff play, once again, it's not even close. As Jokic averaged 30, 14, and 10, averaged more points per game, more assists, shot better from 3, as more at the free throw line. And looking at the advanced stats once again, Jokic in these categories destroys Dwight Howard. And going one step further, of course Dwight in 09 made the finals. But unlike Jokic, lost in 5, compared to the Joker, who won in 5. And for Dwight Howard standards, best center in the game standards, in this series, he was not good. As on his own team, he ranked 3rd in scoring, and debatably was outplayed by Pau Gasol, who averaged 18 and 9 on 60% shooting. Now, Dwight's last comments.
Jokic was the best scorer on this team, the best rebounder, and the best playmaker.
I think might be his worst take. As once again, compared to Jokic, Dwight Howard says in his prime, he was getting 38 and 20, 45 and 18, and is dominating off 2s and not threes. And what he says unironically, that Jokic gets way more post-ups, more attempts compared to prime Dwight Howard. Now, why that's funny, it was Dwight unknowingly admitting he wasn't a great post player, and his teams, unlike Jokic, didn't play through him. And like I said earlier, Jokic is an elite post player, elite post scorer, as well as passer. Compared to Dwight Howard, who offensively really had no bag. And these points Dwight makes, compared to an average center, will be great points. But compared to Jokic, saying you had 45 and 18, these great double-doubles, it really isn't as impressive as you would think. As Jokic just in the playoffs alone scored 53 points, had 43, 11, and 6, 41, 11, and 4, 34, 21, and 14, 32, 21, and 10, even 30, 17, and 17. That right there is a 6-game sample of what Jokic did in this year's playoffs alone. Once again proving Dwight Howard, while great, wasn't as good or great as Nikola Jokic. And like I said earlier, Dwight historically is actually underrated. But having comments like these, saying he's better than Jokic, isn't even close, that's how a player actually gets overrated. As always, thank you guys for watching, hope you enjoyed it.
He gonna tarnish his legacy by saying dumb shit like that. He might as well just be quiet, man. Or like, people gonna defend you if that's how it is, you know, but you don't got to say it for yourself, man. But if y'all enjoy it, I know what to do. Share the video on your social media platforms with your peoples. Click on the last reaction. Like the video, comment, subscribe, and I'm out of here, man.